Thank you, Pei. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for being here to listen to what we have to share with you. Now take a look at this picture. Yeah? This is Winston Chu, okay? And Winston started his life as a soldier, okay? And he became a general. And later he became the head of the Singapore Armed Forces for many years. But he also became a public affairs consultant once he retired. And then, under his leadership, at the Singapore Red Cross, he came up with the idea to organize the Great Singapore Duck Race. And this was done to raise funds. Yeah? And he went to China. Can we see the next slide? Yeah, okay, here they are. Went to China and bought 100,000 rubber ducks. And he sold them to the Singapore public at a reasonable price. But even if the price was $8 a duck, and he sold 85,000 of them, you can imagine what this did to the Singapore Red Cross. So, how interesting that a general, an army man, can be so creative. Later on, he served Singapore as an ambassador in Australia and in Israel. And he is still chairman, as a businessman, of Metro Holdings. And here we have Janice Wong, who studied economics. Yes. But then switched to pastry, and then became famous as an artist and chocolatier, creating edible art. And then she built an entire business empire with it. And finally, an NTU alumnus. It's Eugene So, better known as Dude.sg, who studied computer programming and then became a famous photographer. Then turned to installation art, an augmented and virtual reality genius. He leads two companies, Dude and Mind Palace, a fabulous social enterprise, using customized VR technology to transport nursing home people, residents, to their old homes and their old neighborhoods, incorporating family members. So, are career changes good for you? Think about walking from the Champs-Élysées to the Eiffel Tower in Paris in a straight line. And then think about turning into side streets to discover small bakeries, small coffee shops, antique boutiques, and so forth. Your experience in life, yeah, and your experience from the walk from the Eiffel Tower to the, from the Champs-Élysées to the Eiffel Tower will be completely different. It will be a much deeper and greater experience. Think about time to change yourself. Are you still learning in your job? Are you still valued? Straying from your goals? You want more flexibility, a change of environment perhaps? Do your personal values still align with your employers? The answer may be no, and it's time to go. And when you do look for other challenges, remember the power, as is recognized by top universities and by top consulting firms, of being a tri-sector athlete. Someone who has experience in the public sector, in the private sector, and in the social sector. The social sector is easy because you can do volunteer work, as you are doing. So, and interestingly enough, all these experiences add value to what you're going to do next. You know, what I found out in my own career was when I moved from accounting to public relations, or from public relations to cognac, and from cognac to watches, and from watches to the university, is that all this experience added value to what I'm doing today. So that's something to keep in mind. So it's now time to, first of all, welcome ELAINE to share us here.
I'm sorry.
You were, and then then we will just ask. Let me ask some questions first to the panel members, and then the floor is open to you to answer questions. Okay, so here we go. Angelena, you were first. Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
So you have experienced very significant career changes. Sorry, I need to talk a little louder here. And you are a human resource professional, so that's good to have here. You've helped other people make career changes. So tell us briefly how you have developed your career and what has benefited, during all these changes. And also, if there were times you felt like stagnated, had problems, and were in time to do something else.
Okay, what happened to the one question only? And then you end up with three. To be really honest, I don't think I curated my career. So I was listening to Angeline earlier. I don't think I curated. As somebody who grew up in Singapore, being in a very Asian family, if you were not an engineer or a doctor, kind of go, well, what can you do? So I think that, for me, was the motivator of trying to discover what I really like. But what I realized was I started with what I don't like. So I started my career in banking. The irony is that I did that for 2 years at the height of the banking bubble, whereby 1 year of salary is the bonus that you get. And I walked out after 2 years. And it took a lot of pain because my mother would nag at me and go, what the hell are you doing? Because that's really stupid. I don't look back. I think along the way, I realized that in the banking culture, I know the irony is some of you are looking at my LinkedIn like, didn't you just spend the last 14 years in banking? Yes, I did. But in a different role. And I grew and I matured. So I don't think I developed my career strategy. I think I meandered through it. And I think that the one thing that I would like you all to think about it is there's no perfect solution. All right, so I hear the LinkedIn thing and I understand the curation of it. But sometimes you may have to do 2 or 3 things just to get to the one that you like. And what that meant along the way is I work in restaurant, I moved countries in my very younger days. Hopefully it was 10 years ago, but it wasn't. When you're coming out and you're doing a master's, I often said to a lot of people, 20s is where your the foundation of your career is built on your academics. The minute you hit 30s, it's built on the journey of experience. So if you're still doing exactly what you did when you were 28 at 32, something's wrong, right? And why 30s? Is because this is a time whereby you can experience life and you can take risks. And some of my most valuable lessons in career was during that time, whereby I don't have a mortgage yet. I'm not a mom. Even though some of us be pressured to get married, that's why we all run away and we move countries. But those are good experiences. So what has that benefited me? I think a couple of things. The frame of mind. That career, if you look at the meaning of career, is a path and a progression. But a lot of people take career as static. It's a state of position. My career is the managing director of da. When you have that mindset, you don't want to let it go. And that stagnates you. So I think what has benefited for me, FERRY, is the fact that I really don't hold on to a title. I'm not concerned about it because I didn't have one for over 10 years. I meandered through it. Number 2, you built such a toolbox of different tools, right? I often said to a lot of students, even senior managing directors of the bank, would you invest in only one stock and expect that stock to be your retirement ticket? Absolutely not. Will you draw the most beautiful painting with one color? No. So you've got to go out there and collect experiences, good or bad. All right, in fact, do the bad ones. Don't do the good ones. Good ones are too obvious. Do the bad ones. And I think the third thing that has helped is relationship and network. And I'll talk a little bit about LinkedIn because I wanted to support what Angelina was talking about. Network and relationships are far more important because that's the one thing the algorithm cannot define you, right? But all of you are focusing on that. But the reality is today, the fact that you made time, this is where we get to know you. And I think along the way, I have a lot of people to thank because they helped me as I kind of got lost and meander through.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, some interesting lessons here. Okay, Elaine, you moved, you didn't job hop, but you did move from, very different types of companies. They're already mentioned by Pay. And now you're back home at Visa. And they have been giving you a special name there as well. So what triggered the changes? And were there moments when you really felt, it's time to get out of here and do something different? And what are your experiences in this journey?
Thank you, Ferry, and sorry I missed the introduction. I figure it was a term boomerang. It's not specific to me, but they have a term at Visa where they call people who come back after leaving the company for a while and coming back into the company. They term them boomerangers. So I'm one of the boomerangers. Now back in the role, back in the company and in my role for about just over 2 months. Already it starts to feel like a year sometimes, just because of the sheer amount of change the industry and the company has gone through. So with regards to your question, Ferry, about those moments when it's time to get out of here, if I could go back to why I made those changes I made, and thanks for not making me sound like a job hopper. I think if I were maybe 20 years younger, back in those days, you would have been deemed a job hopper. Apparently these days, it's normal for you to be in a job 2 or 3 years, right? Deferring to the HR professional here. Apparently, the young people are telling me it's very normal if you're in a role or in a company 2 or 3 years. But I think back in the day, it wasn't. So I do remember there was one time I was in an interview and a very senior executive looked at my CV and he pointed out the number of years and the number of different roles that I held. He sort of just said, over the last 9 years, you had spent how much time and where, and your average stint was this number of years. And like I said, during those times, it was probably frowned upon, not so much these days. And I always had to go back to how do I answer those questions back in my younger days. And I think when you are slightly younger, and I'm referring to a bit of a age or generational thing here, just by looking at the crowd, first of all, my observation is it's a very young crowd. I walked in and I told Ferry, gosh, this is a very, very young crowd you have. And then second thing is sitting up here, I'm seeing it's predominantly female. Also probably, why there's that representation on the panel as well. But it's one of those things that we realize in the communications industry as well. This is kind of the trend. So as to the question about, so I've always had to prepare for why did you leave? Why did you choose to leave the company? Especially if you have shorter stints, you always have to be prepared for answering the why. And then the why are you interested in joining this company or taking up the role? Naturally then, as I come back into Visa right now, one of the first questions that I had to be prepared for during the interview was, why do you want to come back? So before my interviews, and my series of interviews, I actually thought about it very, very hard and think, oh gosh, what do I say here? Because there were a lot of reasons that were very personal to me. And I think that speaks to the whole journey. Back to Angelena's point about you own your own professional career and your own professional journey. There is no script to it. When you start off on this journey, you might not even have a certain end point in mind. You might be writing the chapters as you move along the way. Hence, when answering those questions, I often would take, and more recently now, I would take here's a personal reason for why I'm doing this. And on the professional side, here's another reason. So if I may share with you, personally, I joke about how it's midlife crisis right now, probably why I'm making certain changes in my life. But the truth is actually I did have a few priority changes in my family, including parents who are aging, parents-in-law who are aging and ill, and the loss of a family member through death earlier this year, which I did not share too broadly, but I'm hoping to share that right now to give you that. Sometimes you do have personal things that happen in your life that change your priorities. Because to me, the whole career journey you're on is very, very personal. It's deeply personal. There are some things you might not necessarily want to share. But I think you do need to know all that within yourself to know why you're making a certain switch. And sometimes those times when it comes to you, when you have to say, I have enough here, whether it's in the role or in a company, sometimes it can be motivated by things that are very personal to you. So and behind all of that, I think is, what is your personal value? What are the personal goals that you're after? And I'm saying your personal goals, your personal life goals, because career and your job is just one part of your life. Do not let that be who you are. That is just one part of your life. So recognize that and be true to yourself and always have the answer whenever you think about what is your next step. Now, on the professional side of things, often I will reflect on a couple of things. And what's become clearer to me in more recent years as I get a little bit older these days and have gone through a number of large multinational companies is that the kind of environment that you're in is very important. Some call it culture, right? I call it just the environment. And what really boils down at the end of the day to me these days is your day-to-day. What do you do on a day-to-day basis? Do you really enjoy what you do for at least 8 hours a day? Because that's your job. And that's going to take up most amount of your time every day. You're going to walk into the office or be working remotely from your home office. You're going to be doing this day in, day out. Are you going to be enjoying what you're going to be doing most of the time on the job? Right? I think that is a very fundamental question, and I've not quite read it anywhere else, so I was hoping to share this with you in rather simple terms, because that kind of struck me earlier this year as I had some personal experiences. Then thought hard about life and career and all of that, and I came down to very simply, what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis? Do you really enjoy it? There are people who chase after big titles, big name companies, you know, a big fat salary and all that. But I think at the end of the day, it boils down to what do you do day in and day out, and do you really enjoy it? And if you're able to be true to yourself and say you truly enjoy it and you really like it, you will naturally have the answer as to why did you decide to leave and why are you deciding to join the company or take up the role. Sorry for a very long answer. I hope that sort of covers most of the things we're
it's
after.
a compelling story, so we would like to hear that. Okay, MATIN, it's been too long since we saw each other. You know, we were together in one of the courses that we did. And you have, I was just so amazed when I saw your career. So what triggered these changes into so many really different roles? And, you know, if any, were there also negative moments during your journey?
First of all, thanks for having me back. It's great to travel all the way to this part of the world and to meet all of you. I really enjoyed my time during my MMC course a couple of years back. Maybe I think similar to the other panelists as well, I don't really curate my careers in such deliberate manner. If you can't tell by now, if someone knows me well enough since school and all that, I'm a naturally curious person and I'm just interested in a lot of different things. It helps when I grew up in a family where I'm the first to enter university. It's not uncommon if you are from the Malay community. You're only seeing a new generation of people going up. What that means is then I don't have overbearing parents who tells me I need to do well, get my A's and whatever. And all the advice that they gave me when I entered uni, when I was choosing my courses, were go to NUS, graduate and get yourself a job. But back then, I got into NTU too. So I got into NTU School of Communications, which I love, I wanted to go. And then NUS, I was doing Bachelor of Science. And I was just like, oh, what a dread, right? And me being a very earnest boy, and I was doing elders, and there's just too much race of like, you know what, I'm just going to just follow whatever that they've been asking me to do. So I decided to take up the NUS course. But I remember telling my parents, I said, I will be back to NTU. And that was how a couple of years later the MMC piece comes into it. But when I was at NUS, what was great was also the university was also opening up. So even if you do have a major, you could take a whole bunch of other electives just to expose yourself to different programs. And it was fantastic for me. And I went crazy with regards to what I wanted to learn. I took understanding the universe. I took Thai art. I took Chinese literature when I don't even understand a word of Mandarin. I sit through a Chinese orchestra trying to decipher what they're trying, the message that they're trying to put out in the music pieces. I did a program in Vietnam on social entrepreneurship, and I cobbled up some bank loans to go and study in the US because I felt, hey, there's a different culture there. It's something we need to go and learn a bit. And it was fun. And then when it came down to graduation, people are asking me, like, what are you going to do? You are so random. And I said, I don't know, maybe I just joined government. Then I was like, okay. I looked through the government list and I was thinking, I don't know whether some of you are government officers here. The list that I was very interested in was very, very short. And up there it was, okay, Singapore Tourism Board, because it was like, oh, so fun bringing things to Singapore. And then there was the Economic Development Board, all suits and tie, very corporate. And then there was Sentosa Development Corporation, which was also part of the MTI family. And actually that was the only job that I applied for. I applied for in the Singapore Tourism Board under the Management Associate Program because there was one line in the pitch that really resonated with me. You will go through a program where you can choose what you want to do every 2 years. And I was just like, perfect, right? I need clarity of thought, I need some guidance, and this is perfect. So I really worked so hard to just get my foot through the door for the program at STB, and managed to secure it in February, which means I still have 4 more months before I graduated. So I was very, very happy. My parents were happy, so everyone was happy, and I was like, yay, great, right? And then I just graduated. I think STB really trained me in many, many different ways. I had very tough bosses, and I think because I was part of the program and they only hired a few people in the cohort, I worked quite closely with them. I was board secretariat. I was taking up some of this very administrative role where because you're the youngest of the lot, you take up everything, right? But what that meant is also the rigor of public service. For those of you in public service, I'm telling you now, please, I know we grumble about it quite a fair bit, but the rigor, now that you are much older, you can sense from a mile whether something's off. That's an intuition that you can only get by intense amount of training in the public sector. And my bosses also recognize that I'm the kind that I guess I learn fast and I get very curious and I love to get rotated, and so they brought me around. And that's where I rotated to different roles. I did marketing, I did PR, I did comms, I did trade, I did policy, I did investment, I did a whole bunch of things. And then that was when I was given the option, do I want to go to Indonesia and head up one of the area director positions or stay in HQ? And I was just like, and I had a kid then. And I was like, I'm not going to move. And my wife had a job role in Google, and I'm like, I can't let my wife get away with, with me and leave such a good opportunity. And so I said, no, I would like to stay in HQ, but the HQ roles are not great. And that was when Grab came in. Grab came in and told me that we are looking for someone random, someone who has public sector experience. You look like the kind who can roll up sleeves, pull out chairs, find a box, deal with it. Are you up for it? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? Right? And I remember my mom saying, you are very crazy to do that. Like, you have a decent job and government which is stable. This Grab, I don't even know whether it's going to survive, you know. And I said, can you please make friends with your bosses so ensure that they take you back? Then I said, okay, please take me as a boomerang candidate. And so I registered. I said, I will be happy to come back if this doesn't work out. Obviously, my time at Grab changed quite a fair bit, but it taught me a lot of things. When you're in the government, when you speak to people, people respect you because it's not because of you. It's because you represent the government of Singapore. When you're a small startup trying to make it, they size you up within the first 10 seconds of you meeting them. And so you begin to build up, I guess, an attitude of resilience and boldness to say that, you know what, it's a no regrets move. You step up and you pull up your shoes. And you do that, right? And I think that has shaped quite a fair bit to my second phase of my career, where every day, a difficult day, yes, it's difficult, but tomorrow is another day we fight again. And so coupled with that curiosity, then I grew quite a fair bit as well at Grab. And then eventually I did so many things, and then I went over to and to where I am now. But I wanted to end off by also saying this, that even today, my role is a public policy role. I interface with people who are 20 years older than me. And look at how I look like, right? Like, I look like an intern. And I have to, there's a lot of effort that's being put up to many of you. And I would imagine even if you're of a certain gender, if you're in different gender as well, you face it. But my point is, I think just seize the day and just give it your all, because you never know what will come your way. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Well, you know, I could not have a better example of a tri-sector athlete. You know, here's proof of how important that is. Okay, so my next question is for the three of you, okay? And it brings me back to the time when I had spent some time in Asia and in Singapore, and then was asked by my company, a PR agency, Burson Marsteller, to start up a business in Holland. So I returned to my home country, and you know, I had never had in my life, till that moment, any real support from my family or from any friends or so. And I thought, so what shall I do? And I don't know what triggered it, but I just picked up the phone and called McKinsey, the top management consulting in the world. And I asked to speak to the country manager. And lo and behold, I got him on the phone, and he said, what do you want? I said, well, you know, I'm new, back in Holland, I'm new, I'm starting this business, I need a mentor. And he responded, tomorrow lunch, 12:30. So, excuse me, you know, I was flabbergasted. And he became like an incredible mentor, yeah? And the first lesson that he gave me was, number one, get involved socially. Start volunteer work. Number two, 10% of your salary goes to charities. And it only hurts the first time. And then he started to give me other types of advice. And we built up a wonderful relationship which only ended last year when he passed away. So my question here is, did you have these kind of people in your careers, friends or family or mentors, that really made a difference in your decisions to do what you did throughout the years that you built up that career? Angelina, you start?
I'm trying to think really hard. I think there are two people, the two sets of people. The one interesting one, the person I'm trying to think that got me where I went to Japan as a woman in 1997 to start a recruitment company. And I look like, well, I don't look like as an intern, but in Japan you gotta have, first of all, the fact that I wore a skirt changed the dynamics. It was my old boss. And all he said was, if you fail, come home. Right, and this is somebody who I don't really know. I don't know this person really well. But clearly he saw something in me that I could do the job. Sadly, the people who I knew very well told me not to go. Because out of love and friendship, they were very protective. Right, so that's why that question, when I saw the question, I had to think really hard, because we often think friends and family would typically may be the one. So I think my point here is, if I listened to my mom, if I listened to my mom, I think my world will be quite different. And I love her to bits, but she's very traditional and she's very strict. I listened to some of my friends. I think they cared, but they themselves had their own biases about, you know, being random. I love the word. I think that's the thing. You got to be random. You got to be curious. And so, yeah, the person who actually got me where I was a person who I don't really know. I would never call him my mentor then. But obviously, after so many years, he is. And he's somebody that I send a Christmas card, e-card to.
Okay, thanks. Elaine?
Well, I think if we could build on that family theme, Angelena talked about growing up in Singapore and having a very traditional family. I did that. Still, I always say I grew up with a tiger mom. Very true, did all the things like learn piano since you were 6, 7 years old, grew up playing piano, you know. And then naturally when so I don't know whether you guys know, but I'm twice alumna here. So I came to the undergrad program, must have been about 20 years now. And then after graduating, honestly, didn't quite know what to do with myself then, true answer. And then I did have a professor who very kindly said, you are doing really well, and I think you might want to explore the master's program because you know, you might like it. And then I had one of the best professors who coached and guided me through the master's program. That's Ben Dettenberg. Just ran into Nikki in the hallway earlier. Did not get to see Ben yet, but would love to see him again soon. And so Ben set me on this journey. Ben, I don't know how many of you know him, but he's a great professor, and I still remember some of the things that I learned from him in my 2-year journey with him. I did a master's by research program, hence Ben was he was mentoring as well as being a coach, as well as being, what is the official title we call them these days? I even forgot that now. Ferry?
I don't know.
Okay, but there is an official term for, you know, somebody whom you're attached with to work on your master's work and thesis. And because Ben is from such a great background himself, he went to Stanford and got his PhD from Stanford. He's like, Elaine, you're going to Stanford. And I'm just like, all right, let me get through my GRE first, right? So I did go through my GRE. Actually, I did it twice because, you know, for the first time, my roommate then said, you're terrible, you didn't even study, and your mathematics is worse than a secondary school student or high school student. And she coached me in my mathematics and all that. Anyway, I did actually. So what's not officially known is I did get into a PhD program in the US with a full scholarship. Very much thanks to Ben. I wrote my thesis. I actually presented my thesis at a communications conference in New Orleans back in those days, and then also published a journal article together with Ben. And I made it to grad school, got a program at University of Michigan Ann Arbor, and had a full scholarship. But guess what? I dropped out. I dropped out of the PhD program. This is something that's not known, not on my CV. I do not tell too many people these days. But I'm a PhD dropout, right? So naturally, you know, to the tiger mom, they were super happy. Well, first of all, when I got into School of Communications, they had no idea what that is, no idea what that means, no idea what kind of job you're going to do. But at least when I got into my master's program, they're like, okay, cool, she's going to be a professor, right? Okay, that's cool. And then when I drop out, they're like, what? Okay, what's she going to do now with her life? And then I became a journalist. So that was the start of my professional career. I came back to Singapore. I became a journalist. Had a super, super low pay. I remember at that time, one of the PR professionals actually said, oh, Elaine is late to the press conference because she's on the bus. True story. I did not make that up. It was one of those guys from a PR agency that said she's on the bus. That's why she's late for the press conference. So anyway, Back to mentors. So from those days, had a great mentor who set me on a great journey, but obviously I did not fulfill that. Later on, when I decided I needed to be working, so one of the key reasons was I needed to be working. I had not really worked except for doing part-time writing when I was in the undergrad program here, which again, I must say, gave me the opportunity. So any kind of internships, right? Anything that you can do part-time, interning, as long as it gives you the experience, the real-world experience, go for it. Because I did also have a professor at that time and during my undergrad who allowed me to write freelance. And that allowed me to start my first career as a journalist. And then when I was a journalist, I was writing tech stories. And then I had met people. So back to the point about networking, I had met somebody who then introduced me to somebody who got me a job at Microsoft. Of course, you got to know your stuff, right? So you know people, but of course, you got to know your stuff and you got to work hard. That set me along the journey. And then I think, so till today, after about 20 years in communications, my parents still do not know what I do, all right? Yeah, they never knew what I do. They're just like, at least now they're like, okay, she works at that credit card company, right? And then, but here's the thing. I did have in one interview with a very senior executive, he did tell me, he did ask me the question, can you explain your job in very simple terms? So that's a challenge to you, being able to explain your job in very simple terms. I was asked that question 2 weeks ago by some kids in my neighborhood who play with my little 4-year-old niece. They go, so Auntie Elaine, what do you do? So I challenge you to explain what we do to your mother. If your mother is as traditional as mine, who still hasn't got any idea, or to little kids, right? And I challenge you to think about that because, well, in comparison, my younger sister is a doctor. So, you know, that and me, well, clearly we know who's the most successful one here, right? So back to mentors, right? There will be some who put you on a good journey, and then you could be the dropout, but you find your way around. But you're still super grateful because whatever that you've gone through still makes who you are today. And I think that determines also, it makes who you are. And back to my point about do not let your career define you. I think that's very important for everyone to remember. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, Martin?
Yeah, I think for me, I view that as a network of people that has been quite influential in the way I clarify my thoughts as a random person, and also to kind of like help me think about the pathways forward. So I have a bunch of my former managers and peers even from my time in government and then my time at Grab that we constantly keep in touch. They're very sweet. They'll check in on me on like, hey, how things are you okay, are you doing fine? It's very rare. I find that these days, you know, we are usually straight away jumping into the cause of things, and there are people who will contact you out of the blue. There's no ask or anything like that, and they may be people that you just encounter at a conference and an event, and we had a great chat, and they'll ask, how are you doing? No, not about what you're doing at work, but like, how are you feeling, right? And I think those things are great, and I think those are some of the, I can't quite pinpoint on exactly people who have opened those doors, but I find that it's a collective of them who essentially can help to vouch for my character and my work ethic, and that yes, he is random, but you will get A, B, C, D, E if that's what you're looking for. And I think that's what I greatly appreciate with. Yeah.
Okay. So to conclude this part of you know, like people who might have a good influence in you and help you, you know, taking decisions and doing the right thing as you move towards, you know, building a career, you know. Your mentor doesn't even have to know that he or she is your mentor. You know, like you know, my last boss, it's great to have, you know, to have been working after I left now for 25 years without any real bosses. My last boss really was my mentor, although he never knew it. And I was looking very carefully as to how he managed the big corporation, and how he, particularly dealt with people. And there were so many lessons that I've learned from him that have made it possible for me to decide to quit my job at 51, and then to start doing completely different things. As I mentioned before, started a company in France, making cognac, and then later on founding in Singapore Friends of Chinese Opera, and working now with my son on a startup company that produces, although in Switzerland, very beautiful high-end watches. So the fact that that I've made all these changes has to do with listening very carefully to people who can make a difference in your career, and who will sort of propel you to make the kind of changes to make that career as fulfilling as it can be. Okay, so we have like one final question with a relatively short answer, please, of the three panel members, before we open it up to the floor. Okay, and the question is, if there's one piece of advice you can give these very talented students, what would it be?
Am I going first again?
Okay, if you wish, you can go first again, and I can also give you mine.
I'm not going to sit next to you the next time. So I think the word random goes to him, because I think that was a fabulous, but I love that word a lot. The one advice I would say is be employable. Don't be employed. Because being employed, you're at someone else's mercy. Because I decide whether you're going to be employed or not. And sitting where I sit in HR, my 18-year-old daughter grows up with a scar because she had a show and tell in the school one day, and they asked, what does your mother do? My mother fires people every day. So I would say be employable, which means that you're constantly, never think that just because today I am getting a paycheck, this is it. You're always thinking about what else is random out there, what else is curious for you, and building up that portfolio that you have, and be employable. That's my advice.
I jotted down because I think it's very good. Okay, I think for me it's really waking up every day to show up and giving your best, because every day is an interview. Your project mates, every day they're sizing you up. Your friends, anyone that you encounter, they're sizing you up, and it's an interview. And those little things will ladder up to whether or not you'll be employable in the long term. Yeah.
Okay, Elaine?
Something I've said earlier in my responses as well, be true to yourself. That and it's your journey, remember. At the end of the day, it's your own journey. So you need to know what you're after, have your values, be true to yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. So be employable. Yes, very good idea. And also the random answer, I think I really like that, the one that you said before. So thank you. And it also reminds me of of the three examples that I gave. Eugene So, who was actually on a panel discussion in a kind of similar topic. It had to do with the world of work tomorrow. I also was asked the question, like, how did you get to do all these different things? And his answer was, I can never say no to anything they ask me. So, like when he started basically as a tech guy, and then took this photo that became actually one of the famous photos that he made. For 2 years, nothing happened until someone called him and said, I've seen this photo. Do you have any others? And he said, no. He says, well, could you make some others? Because I want to buy them. And he said, sure. So he started to take a number of photos that have actually become very famous. One of the ugliest of them all is a naked centipede of himself, which is hanging in the National Museum of Singapore. It's worth taking a look at. And there's a whole story behind it, which you can find on YouTube. But this answer, I just can't say no to, when people ask me to do things. Also will, meander your journey in ways that you had not expected. Okay, so thank you so far. Now we're going to ask the audience to share with us their questions. So if you have a question, can you please come to the microphone? And number one, introduce yourself. Number two, ask one question, not two questions. Because as you know, often in these settings, you get to hear, I have two questions, but no, please one question. And number three, we do want questions. We don't want long stories, which is also sometimes a problem in the Q&A section. So who can we have at first? Yeah, come.
My name is Yubia, and thanks for all the sharing. So my question is, you all encourage the changes and career switches, but a lot of times when you go to a new phase, it always comes as a lot of time and consuming, energy consuming. So how do you have any suggestions or tricks, how to pick the next direction to go into before I know if I like it or not, or at least have a general idea, would I like it or?
So, all right.
I think my response to that is two things. Where I sit when I interview a lot of people is either they try to be someone else, which in very short time we won't know, because the question that comes at them doesn't hold. Which means that you will only know your career changes if you're true to yourself. If you're busy just doing a job every day because there's a to-do list, right? And then you do that for 365 days. One day you wake up, and a lot of times we tell ourselves, this is it, we got to do this, we got to do this. But you got to take moments of pause to really ask yourself, why am I doing this? All right, what's in it for me? You can make the money many times in other different places. So you got to weigh that out. I don't think there is a straight answer that I can say 1A and 1B and 1C. I think for me personally, if you look at my career, every 18 months I take a pause. Number one, am I creating the value? Because creating the value means that you get paid. Number two, if I'm creating value, my performance is there. Again, I get paid. So Maslow hierarchy of needs, I get paid. Then number three, am I learning? Is this exciting for me? Is this random? Am I still curious about it? So 18 months is often where I start because I know that my attention span is not very good. So I start moving. I start looking for other projects. So I built the combination of that. But you need to have good self-awareness. I think a lot of you guys would keep doing the job until you hope that somebody would tap on your finger. Hey, usually people don't. So that's my response to that.
No, I agree with the number one, be true to yourself. I think the 18 months checkpoint, I do it regularly too, just to sense check whether or not I'm just being busy or am I learning new things. And sometimes you also quickly realize whether or not the role, you've outgrown it. And then the questions are, what are my options? Option one, it's I seek internal mobility to see if I still love the culture here, and then I look around, involve myself in little projects within the organization. Or number two, if you volunteer your time outside of work, that's where you get new experiences. So for instance, I graduated, with the MMC program, right? But I won't be able to, I'm not a comms professional, neither am I in PR. So I don't get to do some of this very going down to writing the press releases, doing campaigns and all that. But I get to exercise some of that muscle in my volunteer work. And I tell them that give me this opportunity because it allows me to activate that side of my brain, because that is another option for you to think about growing. So see growth as there are also multiple pathways towards growth, but it's good to have the 18-month checkpoint to know where you are at. And the last one is when you go for these interviews, we should learn to appreciate closed doors as much as we appreciate successful ones. The closed door ones are really the ones that really put me back, and I'm like, okay, yeah, actually, am I doing something which is of focus? That one, it's very clear to you, and then that's where you take measured efforts to address it. Yeah.
Well, and thanks for reiterating the point about being true to yourself that I cannot emphasize more. But I think another perspective, if I may give, also I think perhaps from a hiring manager point of view, because I'm often in that seat as well, is sometimes people come in with an idea of, I want this because I want the next big job, you know. I think it's also important when you go in there, think about what your value add is. And I think that is very important, especially whether it's you going for an interview or even after you've been offered the position and you're in a new role or new industry that you've never been in before. Think about what is your value add, all right? And again, back to all your past experiences is not for moot. They all make who you are today. You bring something from your past experiences, whether it's a related industry or not, but think about your value add and how can you continue to add value. And then, you know, again, if you have always been true to yourself, then you know that that is going to be fulfilling in every way while you also add value in the process.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello, I'm Joyce. I'm very glad to be here today. And I think whatever you have shared really resonated with me, each and every one of you. Why? Because as you can see, I'm one of the older students here. And what resonated, you know, Ferry, you mentioned that you started something new at 51. It gives me great hope. Angelena, you mentioned that, you know, wow, so many things you mentioned. I just thought, hey, this is like the story of my life as well. You know, and Martin, you mentioned about being random. I have friends telling me that, you know, when are you going to settle down, as in, you know, settle in one job. And Elaine, you know, you mentioned about, you know, everything being personal. Now, sometimes I think that being in a line, I am an educator for many years, and I've tried a lot of other things as well because I was curious. And I think that, you know, if I had stayed on with in a certain position or in a certain school or job, right, I have a lot more to show for it, you know. But I realized that if I stayed on, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't enjoy myself at all. But the thing is this, I'm still curious, I'm still excited about things, and there's so many projects I want to do. But, you know, I also have a family to look out for and things like that. There's so many things that keep me from pursuing what I want to do as well as a person, right? But of course, we have to make tough choices like that. So I'm just wondering that with this new opportunity in this area of study, and with it opens new doors as well, what would you expect from someone making a mid-career switch into a totally new industry? What would you expect more from this person? Because, you know, I'm sorry, but, you know, gender speaks a lot as well, because you do expect women to play certain roles.
Okay,
as
a
well.
very interesting question. And it reminds me of what's happening in the company called M&M Mars, or Mars Wrigley, yeah, where the most senior people, say the C-suite, yeah, so you're talking about the CFO and the COO and so forth, switch jobs every 3 or 4 years. You know, to me that's absolutely amazing that a chief financial officer, you know, is taken off his job and given the job of an AR's director. Wow, you know, this is one perfect way of growing people, you know, into absolute, you know, top executives. So you can also do this on different levels. But, yeah, and these are all people in their mid-careers. But over to the, to the panel before I continue.
So Joyce, I moved off banking and went to a startup. LemmaTree Group is a Web3 blockchain startup. And I am the only person in that team who's CPF'd it, which means that I'm past 55 because I could withdraw my CPF. I know my shoes and that, it's a different story, different time. I think it's important, whatever gender you are, is what is the value that you're bringing. So I'll give you an example. We were hiring legal professionals for the ventures. And I interviewed at least 4 very strong Web3 data privacy lawyers. But they all wanted to do startups. The one person that I hired was the least qualified of the 4. But what he demonstrated, number one, was a couple of things. He could relate. So he didn't give me the legal jargon. He could relate, which meant that he's done a lot of homework to draw for me what he's done and what value he can add. And interestingly, the value was in which law firm he came from and where he did his study, or which firm he was with. But it was the fact that it showed his thinking and his creativity of using what he knows and relate that back to what we're trying to do. Number 2, he was able to tell a narrative of the courage that he has and he's about to show. A lot of times people say, oh yeah, I've done this before, but I love startup because it's this. We all love something. It doesn't mean that we're good at it. I mean, I love fast cars, but you never put me behind the wheels with that, right? So he was able to draw, again, from his own personal narrative as to why. And that showed a lot around some of the adventures in mountain climbing that he's done. Right? It had ground. So when you're doing a career switch from one thing completely to the other thing, what am I looking for? Number 1, I'm looking for how fast can you pick this up, right? And that speed is not about how fast you regurgitate what I need from a law perspective, right? So it's not academic. I need to be able to understand what were the crises that you've dealt with, because that for me is an adult learning ability. And he needed to show that. And by the way, he was the oldest one too. Yeah, but I still remain the queen of CPF, as the venture used to call me. But that was the point. So I think mindset, if you're going to go in thinking, oh my God, because I am who I am, I'm not going to get that, the chances are your questions are going to follow that way. Psychologically, it will come out that way. Number 2, do your homework. He did. I was amazed. His homework was done really, really well. And number 3, he was authentic to who he is. So it wasn't about, I love this and I think startup is really great and I believe the world to be sustainable. And I said, well, what does that really mean? And then, So he doesn't go with jargons.
Okay, Martin.
I think the thing about people with random interests and very curious is that we fall into the trappings of looking at these disparate experiences as A, B, C, D, E. And we forget that sometimes the other way is to reframe it as what is that thing that binds all together. And that was a question that was asked to me in one of the interviews, before which, I mean, I went through many interviews which I never get the job. And I learned a lot more from those, and it made me wonder as to what was my value proposition to the organization. Then I realized, because of the curiosity and this randomness and a bunch of things that we have been experienced with, the horizontal skill sets that you gain is you're able to sense make opportunities. You're like, I can see this very clearly from there. The second one is that you can connect the dots, because that's how you live your life every day, right? It's like, how does different things fit in? You can do that. And I think the third one is being able to unpack the complexity that people talk about, right? And I give you an example. I mean, today, there's a lot of things that are happening in the world, right? The complexities of why wars are happening. If you notice, right, the extent to which people understand the complexity, you can read it from a mile, right? And if you take a deep step further, and if you are the kind who are essentially very curious, you begin to ask questions around, can you let me know a bit more about what exactly is complex? And you go down that rabbit hole. And I think that is a skill set that today, in a time where new jobs are being created, industries are being disrupted, you kind of need an entire new frame of mind. And I think that's why I always say that this is the age where if you do not have a domain expertise, actually it's fine, as long as you have that curiosity, because we just need the energy to help unclog some of these things. Yeah. So maybe another way to do it is to reframe that. And I think you begin to see the light as to what your value propositions are and to articulate them. And I think you will see wonders come your way.
Thank you. If I may just summarize what our two panelists have said so far, because a few key points have been reiterating a few times, right? I love what Martin said about connecting the dots and also being able to explain complex things in simple ways. I think often that is it could be something that people take for granted or rather undervalued maybe, but sometimes as a manager, I ask questions of the team. It's not, and once in a while, I do have to act dumb, maybe because I'm trying to figure out how much they know. But most of the time, I ask a question because I genuinely want to know what's your point of view. Or if you had gone to another meeting that I wasn't at, I would appreciate you trying to synthesize and explain and summarize for me in simpler terms. That way you show me that you understand, you help me understand, and I think that's how we work as a team, right? So I think key thing here is, what is your value add? What value do you bring? I think that's important for each and every single one of us in an organization, big or small, no matter how senior or junior your role is, you always need to think about what is the value that you bring, because once you start bringing that value, I think that makes you rather unemployable, maybe, if I could borrow Angelena's words. But again, yeah, it's back to being true to yourself, knowing what you bring to the table.
I think if I may as well, changing careers are difficult. Yeah, but I think very often we think that it has to be a full-time thing. So how I got LemmaTree was we dated. We didn't get married, we dated. So I offered my help for free initially. I said, sure. I said, I'm curious, right? I don't know Web3. Today I can talk about it. I was curious about it. I came from banking. So we dated. So you sometimes got to show that you are committed, that you want this, and you're not just saying it. So I did that for, I think, less than a week. Then I still dated. So I dated for free, and then I dated with a little bit money, because I needed to find out, maybe this isn't for me either. You know, I don't wear sneakers to work. I came from banking, right? My jeans don't. And then the policies are all topsy-turvy, and I'm supposed to change that. So that's something that I will even ask some of you, that, you know, do it for a week, right? Pro bono.
Yeah. Okay. So mid-career. This is actually like one of my good friends is a public relations communication director, major bank, and got laid off 2 months ago. And so I met with her because now she's looking for a new job. So where are you looking? She said, well, in the banking industry. So then we had to have a serious conversation about what she was going to do. Yeah, and to change that mindset into, you know, why don't you try something different? Why does it have to be full time? Why can't you just work on your own as a freelancer? Why not focus on the social sector? So, and that really made her think for the first time. You know, and Lee Kuan Yew said it, I didn't know that. You have to work till the end of your life. Yeah, it was written in the Straits Times on Sunday by Tommy Coe, yeah, whom I admire, because at 85 he's still teaching at NUS. So you know he's my hero in that respect. You know, but I recall you know when I was running person master. I needed to hire a CFO. So, you know, he had four top candidates, yeah? Three, you know, like in their 30s, you know, smart, you know, handsome, everything. They were all men, by the way, at that time. And the fourth one was an old guy. Yeah, he was like 57 or 58. And, you know, one of the things he said was, you know, for me it's impossible to get a job, but, you know, I can do this and this and this and this. So then, you know, we looked at the four candidates, and I decided to hire one of the young ones, yeah? And so I sent him a note first, and he responded by calling me and saying, this is unacceptable. I think you must hire me, yeah? And for the following, and this has nothing to do with my age, but for the following reasons. I know that I'm better than any of the three other candidates that you have. I was just, you know, thinking by myself, so I'll call you back tomorrow. And I hired him. And it was like, you know, a master stroke. Yeah, so this whole thing of age, yeah, as you can imagine, you know, it's very close to my heart. You know, I don't think that, you know, particularly when talented people who are employable, yeah, are, you know, are getting into a situation in their 40s or 50s, that there is a reason to despair. I think there are always other options, and they may be more creative than it looks at first. Okay, now finally, your turn. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Alan. I don't know, but it's worth a try.
Test one. Test. I think it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Alan. I think Ferry moderated very well, and when I was doing that, I was writing some notes, so trying to get more anecdotes for my thesis or whatever. But it feels like I'm attending Ferry's PR lessons. But I have some questions for the panelists. I think, especially for Elaine, I think you mentioned something that really resonates with me. You mentioned do not let your career define who you are. I think this is a really important and impactful statement. I think it's really good to step off our comfort zones. I think I have similar experiences as you as well. So I think the question is choosing a job that makes us happy and also what we can contribute confidently and happily is the key. So my question for you is, do you think that, you know, in terms of the communications domain, right, what is the biggest challenge for comms people like us now? We are always, you know, some of us are always like looking for like to upgrade, you know, in terms of courses and all, but somehow it may not be what we like. Yeah, so I want to hear from you from that. And I think Martin also shared an important statement about every day is an interview. I think this is something that I will jot down as well. So, and it makes me feel that being in the MMC course is a privilege, and seeing successful alumni like yourself makes me feel that I'm in the right course. My question is, what was your biggest takeaway from this course? Yeah, thank you.
I'll take the first one first. Thank you very much and for your active participation and for the questions. So I gather you're in a comms role then. May I know your name, please? Alan, nice to meet you. And you're a communications professional. Are you on a break right now, or are you still working?
So I started off in PR.
Right.
And then after that, I moved on to radio.
Right.
And because of some live events, I actually I started off in PR, yeah. So after that, I moved on to radio. And I'm doing it part-time now. And before joining the MMC, I was lecturing at the Poly and ITE.
Right.
But I took a career break because of some live events, yeah. So, yeah, I'm taking this break to also upgrade myself.
Okay, got it. So thank you for sharing that as well. So I think that and this, your question actually keeps me up every day, and every night, day and night. During the day I go to work and I constantly remind myself and my team to always remember what I said about adding value. So I think it's comms people, you do need to add value. And how do you add value? Always know the business really well. I always say communications functions are sometimes we're known as a support function, or a cost center in some ways. and people don't know where to place communications professionals. Therefore, I think it's critical to ensure that every time you're working, you're adding value. And in order to do that, know the business really, really well. So another important thing as you think about switching careers or switching roles, industries, make sure that you do invest time in learning. And I know that one of the most difficult times whenever I go to a new role or new company is always the first maybe 6 months to a year, the amount of personal investment that you have to put in, the nights and the weekends that you personally have to invest in order to get up to speed with the business is really important. That I cannot emphasize more. Then your second question, maybe I can leave the rest of the panelists to take that on.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen, for the question. I love the question because that was one of the things that I wanted to also come here to share with you guys about MMC, right? I think the genesis of me going to the program was for me to basically fulfill one of the things I wanted to do as a teenager, which is going to NTU Wiki School. Then really going into the nuts and bolts of like what it means to do comms. When I sat through the MMC program and I went through every courses that was there, I think to me, as I was sitting down there learning and absorbing, I was also thinking about how does this currently apply today in my work? Because I was taking out a part-time program, right? Which means I'm still working, seeing all the crises unfolding, and then also learning some of these things at night, right? And one of the things that quickly came out to me was that the comms function today, if anyone in an organization still thinks that it's a support function, it's a cost center, I think they are beginning to miss the plot. The strategic value of comms, it's one that I think all of us have to articulate and have to defend. And it is one that can make or break the stock prices. The choice of words that you use, these are all not just semantics. It's actually, there's some level of intelligence that goes behind it, the playbook towards it, how you think about this from a very strategic lens matters. And then also at the same time, think about how that complements other roles that you may do, right? So for me, even when I go into the policy world, how we engage and speak about certain things, how we frame things and how we position, these are valuable things I learned from the MMC program. Things I learned from crisis comms, things I learned from PR. So I combine the different things up together and I'm like, oh, actually this is great. So I think the MMC program offers that you may not be able to see very clearly when you go for each of the courses because they're very specific. But when you pull yourself out, there are parts of each that you can combine and it complements and it becomes very strong. Now, as comms professionals, like what's the best kind of like stuff for you to upgrade on? My recommendation is to go deep into a subject matter, the domain. So if let's say you're into banking and into the finance, like go straight into it. Like if you're into technology, go into like what exactly the technology is about. Because only with a strong understanding of the industry or the particular sector that you're supporting, then can you do your job very well and value add, and that's where people will recognize you for that. Because that's something that those who are in the field do not know how to do. They may be able to tell you how a product works, but they can't, for the life of them, talk about that and convincing other people about it. Yeah.
Okay. Can we have one last question in terms of timing? Yeah? A quick one and quick answers? Okay, yes. Okay, one question, one panelist. So you can choose the panelist.
Hello. Yeah, hi, my name is Nika. Okay, so my question is more for the female, so it's one or two. Okay, well, I have been thinking about it. I do resonate with the fact that your career is one part of your identity, but you're actually an entire human being with all these different roles. So most of us are daughters, some of us eventually will be wives and mothers. And I guess my question is, how have you, while building a career, struck the balance between doing all these other roles and hopefully being good at it? So either can answer the question.
Do you want to try? I'm sure you have to do that as a son and a father and a husband. I don't think that's any changes. It's a tough one. I think because your identity, so I chose never to let career define my identity, right? Because I didn't want to be employed. I often wanted to be random. There comes a time, So I got married very late. I devoted a lot into my career. For a good reason, because I wanted to be away from home, because I needed to get married, and I wasn't about to do that. So the identity part of me really struggled when I became a mom, because I can't run now, right? I'm responsible for a life. And that was a very critical juncture of, I think for most of us, is a very difficult one where, do I give up? Do I not? My husband's a banker. In fact, for many years, we lived apart. He was in Hong Kong, I lived there. So I was like a single mom. So all the more that difficulty of trying to raise her and being at work. I think the couple of things that I would say, number one, no one's a superwoman. You gotta build a support structure around you. Number two, I'm a perfectionist. I couldn't be one. So something's gotta give, right? I'm not gonna be a mom that makes cupcakes because I can't bake. So I order. Number three, you need to be honest to the people at work. That there are certain times, so my diary used to be blocked out, that between 6 to 8, unless something's on fire, I'm not going to take the call. Because that's where when she was much younger. Managing that expectation at work, these are external, managing expectation, managing cupcakes, all that's fine. I think the internal guilt is what I would say everybody will go through, because you will feel so guilty when she says, Mama, but someone else's mom did this. You're like, oh my God. Okay, and this is where the self-identity crisis will challenge you. But I think for me, it was very much around, this is a path that I've chosen, that I wanted to have my curiosity and my randomness. So it's never going to be perfect. Because that was, I think for me, that identity part, being a mother was the hardest. Being a daughter to my mom is only now, which is one of the reasons why I'm also changing careers. Those are personal reasons that you change career. Being a wife, I have a very supportive husband. So he's very comfortable for me to have my career. And we talked a lot about that. And I think the last advice I'll give you, and this was somebody who is a psychiatrist who told me, in a child's life, there are certain milestones and juncture whereby as parents, you need to be aware of. And so those were junctures where I gave up the next promotion, right? And I gave up that next promotion because knowing that she's far more important. So you can't have it all. So that internal guilt is something you got to be, you acknowledge it, you want to grow to accept it, and it becomes part of your identity. You cannot hide it. So I don't want all of you to think, oh yeah, it's just great, now she's talking about it. No, it's actually quite guilty when I cannot bake the cupcakes and she asked me why not.
So, you know, I wonder, so that's an interesting question about women, right? And then I love how Angelena started by saying, but men also have to juggle the other roles. So I guess, you know, back to gender, you know, we can go into another probably long panel discussion, fireside chat, whatever, maybe into the night about all those things. So I do not have children, but I do get questions from friends, people at work who dare to cross that line and actually ask me, you know, does it in any way make you feel less of a woman? Right? Look, I consciously chose not to have children. My husband and I have discussed, we consciously chose not to have children. But I do have a very, very close relationship with my current 4-year-old niece, whom I love to bits, and I spend a lot of time with her and together with our family. So I think it's about the support structure. So, you know, you give other people, sometimes you're part of that support system and structure, right? Even if I'm not a mom myself, but I am part of that support structure because I know how important it is. I cannot say I feel the mom's guilt, but I do feel guilty sometimes being the aunt, and I'm like, yes, I will buy that for you. Yes, I will do that for you. You know, you can't say no, right? So that's the extent that I feel guilty, but again, I think, yeah, you have back to one of my key messages. Yeah, be true to yourself. Your career doesn't define who you are. You've got different other roles to play in your life. All right, your job is one of you, and then you've got all the other roles that you play. So at the end of the day, when you just before you sleep, I think it's very important that we all are able to then say, I'm grateful for the day. I'm able to have a good night's sleep, and conscience is clear. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Great to be here.